Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of GenAI Vlog. So today I want to show you guys what do I typically do before I start an AI project. So I go to my VS Code, open a Markdown file, and the way I typically do is to use a Mermaid diagram to create a sequence diagram. So first things first, you want to create a sequence diagram just like that. That's your frame. And then you want to create a couple of objects. In sequence diagram, we call this the participant. I would start with beginning and end, right? So you have a start and then you have your end. So in the middle, you want to make sure that you know what you're talking about, right? So typically I will start with data. What kind of data are we talking about? And then the question is, are these data ready? Chances are they're raw data, they're not ready, then maybe you need to do data processing. So after you do data processing, you can probably start building models. For simplicity, I'm just going to pretend that this is an ML project. So I'm going to say, hey, there's a participant called machine learning model, and that needs to happen. And with that model being defined, you want to train it or you want to fine tune it, depending on what domain you are. So the next participant is going to be this training or fine tuning. After you train a model, you obviously want to evaluate it, right? So there's a step in the middle that here says evaluate, and that needs to happen before the project finish. And then in the end, we also need to talk about deployment. So are we talking about a PowerPoint presentation, or are we talking about standing up some sort of API? What context are we talking about? So deployment needs to happen before end. So with that being said, there's also a stakeholder, but I'm going to draw a stakeholder just in a minute. So these are the building blocks or the steps that need to happen. Now let's see how the information flow from one side of the sequence diagram to another. So we're going to start with collecting data. So from beginning, we want to collect data. So that arrow here means that's when the information flows from one hammerhead to the second. So once you collect data, you want to process it. We just talked about that. So you want to draw a second diagram. And the second arrow here means that you want to process the data. And maybe that's some sort of Python code or some sort of Jupyter notebook that will tell you what the deliverable is. After you process data, you can build your first model. So take the processed data, build your model, whatever it is, right? It could be a logistic regression model. It could be a neural network model. That model needs to be built. And then you are entering into what I call a inside loop. So what that means is there is actually a loop that you go from the model that you built to training and fine tuning to evaluate it. And then maybe you go back to change the model a little bit. And I call that a loop because in practice, this cycle typically loop a couple of times. It's unlikely that you build a model and then you train it and then boom, it worked. That's very unlikely. Chances are you're going to repeat that process a couple more times. So how do you know that this is done, right? How do you know that this process finishes? Like what stops this loop? So this is where the stakeholder comes in. So we're going to create this new character, John, right? You can think of as an independent stakeholder here, or some sort of executives, or some sort of product manager, or it's simply your boss, right? Whoever is sponsoring that project, that stakeholder, John, needs to happen. It needs to be in the picture. He may not be along your side every step of the hammerhead, but he needs to be in the picture. So you can go to him for help, for guidance, if you have a roadblock or if you have an evaluation process that you need someone to take a look at. So that's where that actor comes in. We're going to call this guy John. So once you have John in the picture and you want to have some sort of stopping rule to stop this loop, right? Then you present to John, right? So you take your project, you go to John, you say, hey, this is a version 1.0. Do you like it? He's going to say yes, he likes it, or he's going to say no, he doesn't like it. Chances are the very first time probably won't like it that much or not like it 100%. So he's going to give you some sort of feedback. So you receive the feedback and then you go to evaluation, you reevaluate what the feedback is, and that ought to be able to inform you what to do next. And obviously the project hasn't finished, right? You want to come back to data or data processing or modeling, so on and so forth. So that actually triggers the second loop, or what I call the macro cycle. So this bigger loop here or macro cycle is referring to the process that you take the stakeholders' feedback and you go back to the beginning. For example, data collection, is that a problem? If there's no problem, let's go data processing. Is there a problem? If there's no problem, let's reinitiate this microcycle. And then you build a model, train it, evaluate it, so on and so forth. And once the small cycle finishes, you come back to the big cycle, bring back to the stakeholder, see if he likes it. So once he likes it and we're good to go into production, you can then reissue a new model to deployment. And then John will obviously be the guy that's doing the final evaluation. You present the model to him, see if he's okay with it. And then he's going to provide you some sort of feedback. So there you go. When I run an ML project or AI project, I typically refer to this kind of framework such that every step of the way, you know where the idea is coming from, you have an execution, and you know where things go. So hopefully this shed some light to show you how to run an ML AI project. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like.